And here we are. I will give people a moment to come on in. I am double checking. I cannot I cannot begin to tell you what a wild experience it has been trying to launch the inaugural session of the resurrection sessions. I'm going to allow you all to funnel in while I get things set up. But I just wanted to make sure all the live streams are good and everything is running over. I'm double checking over in YouTube. Looks like we're good. And we are live in Facebook as well. We don't start until 6:30. This is just me getting all set up. I'm so excited to see that everything works the way it is supposed to. I am almost 100% recovered from having bronchitis. It went from flu to pneumonia, downgraded to bronchitis about 2 weeks ago. And no, my voice is not 100%. I feel amazing. I am so looking forward to unboxing. This is one of the coolest things I have had the gift of being able to provide. Love this so much. If you do not have the deck yet, excuse me, I will place a link in the chat in order for you to get the deck. And the book that we are talking about, I'm going to wait right until 6:30ish to cut open this deck. I have been using a sample deck from back when I first started. This is a sample deck from when I first started the Kickstarter, and I had these 12 sample decks. And I remember the printer kept saying that the quality of the sample decks would not be the same as the actual deck. And I was so in awe of the fact that this deck looked like this that I was like, oh, the sample is lit, until I got the real deal that I mailed out to all of our Kickstarter supporters. I will let everybody make their way into the room and we gonna get into it. I'm gonna grab a copy of the Planet Not Buried book, the companion poetry book. One sec. Just a moment. We had so many technical difficulties when I first decided that I was going to launch a podcast, and there were so many different platforms, and it is overwhelming when you have a multitude of things to do. I wanted it to be seamless. I didn't want there to be technical errors, and I wanted people to be able to come back to the discussion over and over and over again. I'm dropping a couple of things in the chat. One second. We've got about 3 more minutes before I'll dive in. What I will do is get started promptly every week because, time is limited. It's a bi-weekly podcast, so I'll give you the spiel at 6:30 so that Everyone had an opportunity to get in. Let me just check over on YouTube and make sure everybody is good to go over there. I see our people on Facebook are in the room, and let me make sure that YouTube has what it needs. All right. I am really excited that I get to do this. I love my work. All right. Let's take a peek over here. Yeah, it is excellent. I am excited to see it's on all platforms. We are good to go. Our people can watch from either one. And from where I can see, the quality is excellent. In comparison to last week, y'all, it looked like when I was testing it out last week, it looked like I was talking in a tin box. All right, platforms are up and running. Bear with me. I'm going to post some things in the chat, and you will be able to check out. If you did not get the Oracle deck, you'll be able to get yours ordered from the website. All right, we are counting down. Let me touch base. We may have a couple of special guests pop in while we are speaking. Being that tonight is the inaugural episode and the question, do you want to be well and are you willing to pay the cost, is a weighted question. And I don't know if you have the book, but for those that don't know, I'm going to walk you through how this works. So, my name, if you don't already know, if you're here, you probably already know that I am Confidence Omanai. I am a poet, an end-of-life doula, an artist, and the founder of Haughty Hood Chic. This isn't just a podcast. Y'all, I got enough things to do, okay? Enough things to hunt down. I don't start things just for the sake of being seen. There are mics everywhere. But this is a space for people to tell the truth, which I find spaces for real truth telling to be limited these days. I am unboxing my actual copy of my deck. This is the real deck, not the sample. Planted, not buried. On the inside, the question is, are you a grave or a garden? And that is a question that I had to ask myself, and that many of you may have had to ask yourself at some point. So, tonight is our first session, and we are beginning with the card right here, planted, not buried. And the question sitting at the center of this work today is a simple question, but it's not an easy one. The question is, do you want to be well? Not fixed, not palatable, well. This season the session is held alongside a book called Salt Eaters by Toni Cade Bambara. So if you already have your deck, which many of you do, because baby, y'all done had me running up and down through the post office delivering these things. And I know a few of you bought them at Alchemy Ritual Goods. You can also get them at the Museum for Black Girls here in Denver. Shout out to Charlie for supporting. This is the guidebook that goes with the Planted Not Buried Oracle deck. So the Oracle deck is 44 cards. I want to talk about the process in making this deck. It took me 3 long years to design this deck. I am blessed to have had dear friends Lalanya Simone and Vanya be able to midwife this project with me and ensure that I didn't quit when it got hard. And even the process of making this deck, what I had to endure and survive while making medicine, is part of the discussion that we're going to have tonight. So I'll start off with this is the card, Planted Not Buried. If you have your deck, pull the card out so that you have that as a focal point. In the guidebook, I'm going to read the acknowledgments before I go too much further. To my ancestors, the unbroken line of brilliance and bone deep love, the ones who dreamt me here, I honor you. To my spirit guides, those who move in mystery, lighting my path with fierce clarity. Thank you for the visions, the warnings, the stillness, and the strength to begin again. To my tribe, bloodborn, soul called, and spirit shaped, thank you for bearing witness, for reminding me who I am when the world makes me forget, for holding the mirrors and the medicine. This deck was planted in faith, watered with tears, and bloomed from shadow into offering. It is a love letter, a key, a calling home. With reverence. So I put a table of contents in the book because listen, y'all, I don't know how many decks I got at this point. What I did, thank you, shout out to our legal logian and good friend Natasha. I got a scanner, y'all. I got a handheld scanner so that I can create an inventory that tells me not only how many books I have, but how many Oracle decks I have. But have you ever been shuffling endlessly through a deck trying to find what a particular card meant? So, Planted Not Buried, the card is on page 16 and 17. And I'm going to start off by reading this to you. As I said, this session is going to be held alongside every card in this Oracle deck has a reading assignment. It is the entire book. I'm not giving you just chapters. Hey, that's not how I work. It's not how I roll. This is my medicine. Do with it what you will. But the book, The Salt Eaters by Toni Cade Bambara, pairs perfectly with this card, Planted Not Buried. We are in a conversation with a text that asks us, what does it really mean to choose healing and stay with it? If you want to move with me beyond this session, if you want the cards in your hands, if you want the work to continue after this live, you can go find it inside the online store. Take what resonates, stay present, and be honest with yourself as we move through this, because what tried to bury you didn't win. If you don't know who I am, I'm an end-of-life doula and a poet and a mom. And we live in a nation that is coming apart at the seams, where there is a raging, a raging femicide happening. And we are holding each other together as best we can. We are holding the babies and the orgs and the families and the brokenness and all of the lies. And we are holding the betrayal of the people who claim to be comrades who ushered in this crazy. And so let's talk about what it feels to be planted and not buried. Because of the bronchitis, y'all, I will be intermittently sipping on my water and my wine. Get into it, okay? You can be sober in your space. Please, by all means, don't let this be a challenge for you. But it's Wine Down Wednesday, okay? So let's read Planted Not Buried. For those of you who do not know, I am not Christian and I do not identify as Christian. I think it's enough people pretending to be Christian moving through the earth, and I don't want to be one of them. I say that to say that the Bible is part of the hoodoo tradition that my ancestors practiced. There are portions of the text that we have used to serve ourselves and we will continue to use. And I also pull from other sources, the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is one of my favorite sacred texts. And at the beginning of Planted Not Buried, the card, I quote, "Death is certain for one who has been born, and rebirth is inevitable for one who has died. Here you are, pinned under the rubble of a life you once knew, a love that is no more, an organization that has betrayed you. Insert calamity. Sweetheart, sorrow has seeped into the very marrow of your bones. You feel every cut and contusion. All the light you held is spilling through the cracks. I do not visit your grave to lament beside you, dear one. I come with a warning and a promise. Your enemies are prematurely rejoicing over the perceived end of your glory. This is not where your story ends. Close your eyes. Sink your feet and fingers into soil. Let the unbecoming take what no longer serves you. Let your tears salt the earth, cradling the corpse you are climbing out of. Let your dreams fertilize the flesh and sinew stretching over your dry bones. You are in formation. A grave and a garden look alike to the untrained eye. You have been planted, not buried. This is the grow up, my love. If you had, once again, this card, I am reading from the guidebook. And this is what the guidebook looks like. I think if I could get a level of cooperation, there we go. This is what the guidebook looks like. I'll drop photos, and this is the card. If you would like to, I'm going to do a book signing and a reading, one at Alchemy Ritual Goods and likely one at a local gallery in the next week or two. I had almost completely sold out of books, and I did not want to do a book signing with a limited amount of merch. I have plenty of Oracle decks, but I am waiting for this new shipment. Please feel free to comment thoughts, questions in the chat. I am going, there we go. Hey, Carmela, I love you deeply. I am so glad you made it in the room. I can see that you are with me on YouTube. I'm going to start with reading one of the, so this is Roll the Stone Away. Roll the Stone Away is the companion poetry book that goes with the Oracle deck. There are 18 poems in this book that coincide with cards in the deck. And of course, the opening would be the card we are talking about. Oh, we're going to get this together next week. There we go. So this is what the inside of the book looks like. You have the index, but you have the card. And then when you turn the page, this is a QR code. That QR code leads you to the audio recording of me performing this poem at the Leon Gallery. If you did not have the opportunity from January 2023 to March of 2023, this work lived in an exhibit that I had the honor of putting forth at Leon Gallery. The name of the exhibit was called Did You Die Though? And it showed 16 versions of me that I had left behind. And I believe in honoring every version and every woman that you have been. I'm going to do this because that sounds fun. I am learning these things in real time. So I love that it's going to try something about putting the comments or the questions that you ask on the stage so I can see it. I'm going to read Planted, the poem, and then I want to ask a question and talk about what my experience has been with that question. Let's see. Okay. There is a seed that learns to be its own sustenance, source of light, knows what will not nourish it, rejects poison apples, prunes the leaves that look too closely like the tree it fell from. You are not the tree you fell from, or the yard you landed in. Wasn't no plan to plant you anywhere safe or bathed in sunshine. No one ever meant to nourish you. Where you get them leaves, little brown girl? It's a wonder you grew at all. All those choking vines and weeds you wrestled for a patch of rocky soil, a drop of water, a place in the sun. How you magic scorched earth into a field of dreams ain't nothing short of a miracle. Where you get them branches, brown girl? You survived. In spite of their best efforts, they was expecting you to wither and die in the box they built for you down there in the dark. But a grave and a garden look alike to the untrained eye. In the exhibit, each version of me was marked with a grave marker, and this grave marker was marked up against the wind, 1979 to 1985. Okay, so that is the core of this deck. This deck was built on the concept of, and if you look inside your deck, there is a key at the bottom. It was important to me to place that there and throughout the deck. Just get into the gilding. I love this gilding. When I initially started designing, my friend showed me lots of other colors, and some people were convinced that the metallic green would look better. And even the printer tried to show me other things. And y'all, I was set on copper because it spoke to my spirit. And I think that it aligned well with the deck. And it is one of the most beautiful features in this deck. I love those colors. I hope that you have had an opportunity. I've gotten the stories, I've gotten the post. It gives me joy to know that I hung in there, because it was in itself miraculous that I've still managed to create this deck. I built this deck while living through what would have killed others, what almost killed me. I kept building when it looked like the most audacious, impossible thing to do. I kept building when I was still buried. I kept building in the cocoon. And the only difference between being planted and being buried is making a decision that you do not end here. And I am stubborn, and I have repeatedly had to stare down death and state I ain't going nowhere. So let's move to the question. The very first question in the book Salt Eaters by Toni Cade Bambara. Let me grab an image of it for you. I have the Kindle version and I have the hard copy. Toni Cade Bambara opens with some powerful quotes that really sit in my spirit as discussion prompts. And when she says specifically, the character says, you got to give it all up, the pain, the hurt, the anger, and make room for lovely things to rush in and fill you full. And when I read that quote, I'm going to post that here in the chat along with the question. Okay, here we go. So the prompt is in the chat. And let's take a peek. Let's see. There we have it. Okay, so that's our first prompt. And I want us to ask ourselves the question, what have we been holding that's taking up space where something beautiful is trying to grow? I am not here for toxic positivity. And I think that in order to heal pain, we have to acknowledge the damage being done to us, the things that we are forced to endure. I talk a lot about the forced extracted labor of single parenting and the rage of watching every day a new headline of some brilliant Black woman whose life has been cut short by a man who is not mentally ill, but who is committed to control. And I have been watching people create think pieces around the murders of these women in April. And it's been said repeatedly. They want to say not all men when these scenarios take place, when life is stolen. And they want to call it a mental health crisis, but it is not that. And that is a hill I am willing to die on. It is not a mental health crisis if if you can control how you show up in the rest of the world. If any of you have ever had the misfortune of encountering narcissistic, abusive, controlling, broken humans, you understand that they can present, it is a calculated deceit. Crazy people don't discriminate. Mental illness generally does not limit itself to I can keep the facade up in public and keep the facade up for the school, for the job, for the pastors at the church, and your wrath and your anger and your guile is only directed at the object that you have created. You have turned a woman into an object and you want to remain in control of her. That's not mental illness. That is calculated evil. It is a means to hang on to control when you have lost the ability to do so. These deaths have me in my feelings as a woman who lives by her 2A amendment rights and believes every woman should be carrying. Thursdays is ladies' night at inside shoot indoors, and it is every lady that goes to shoot indoors on a Thursday, you get a free gun rental, a free target, and you just have to pay for the ammo because you have to use their ammo to shoot. I often do drinks and drills. That means we're going to go and do drills first, and then after we will have drinks and talk about safety and how we are protecting ourselves from these kind of vipers. We will do an episode with a couple of my brothers in community. There's a card called FOTEP. And when we talk about protecting these charlatans that move through our community, hiding themselves in proximity to good men, I have friends who have fallen victim to them. I have been harmed by them. But we will save that for the episode called FOTEP, where we break down men who wear the conscious costume and pretend to be invested and concerned about community while simultaneously preying on it. What is something that you have been holding on to that takes up space where something beautiful is supposed to grow? I want you to just sit with that question. If you want to post in the chat, I'm making this big so I can see. Thank you so much, Carmela. Okay, second question. And Carmela, feel free to chime in, and I will give an opportunity for people to step up and speak. Uh, the second quote from Toni Cade Bambara's book, and bear with me, one of our guests is trying to enter. Let me make sure that they've got what they need. I am doing this in real time. What I'm looking forward to is handing off some of my responsibilities to a personal assistant. I also am the co-founder and executive director of a nonprofit here in Denver that we founded 6 years ago. And in running a nonprofit, raising a 10-year-old with autism and ADHD without his father being in the same state, and running a full-time business is insane. I don't know why I do these things. I do what I must when I must, but I'm looking forward to having support so that I don't have to navigate everything myself in real time. But for now, We are enough. I am so glad that you are in the building and that you have been able to connect. I love just this is an inaugural session. So for me, just getting to see that I got everything working and that it is doing good um, tells me that we have a solid platform for what we want to do moving forward. Okay, got it. 1 second. And last. All right. So the second quote, if you have not read the book Salt Eaters by Toni Cade Bambara, please get into it. I love when the grandmother asks the question at the beginning. I'm going to get to her quote because her quote hits me the hardest and really sat in my spirit. But here's another. For people sometimes believed that it was safer to live with complaints, that it was necessary to cooperate with grief. It was all right to become an accomplice in self ambush. Take heart to flat out decide to be well and stride into the future sane and whole. And it had me, hey, Felicia, welcome. That would be amazing because my God, today, uh, navigating the technical and being the one that needs to move forward with programming is not the easiest task. I appreciate you, Felicia, for even being willing, and we could definitely talk about that. It made me ask the question, where in my life had I been cooperating with my own pain and what it would look like to finally decide against it. And y'all, this is a space for honesty, so I'm gonna be real 100% about what I have experienced, what many of my people have experienced, and I'm gonna talk about what I have lived through. 2022 was one of the hardest years of my life. And when you ask the question, where in your life have you been cooperating with your own pain and what it would look like to finally decide against it? I ended friendships. I had a friendship that had lasted, it has been 28 years. Now, the wild thing about that is for my inner circle, that is actually not abnormal. For my truest tribe, one of them, we have been friends for 32 years, one for 35, another for 28. Like my people is my people and they ride. We generally don't let go of each other. We have been forced to let go of so much. And what I had recognized is that I had lost so many people. The people who were fundamentally responsible for providing for me, for taking care of me, were not well enough to do so and made other choices. And I had been on my own. I was paying rent. I had my own apartment at 16. It was a 300 square foot studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was in this complex called Observation Point. And y'all, my little rent was $309 a month. But look, in 1996, that 309 was a little chunk. And I feel like an old Cosby episode, but I legitimately did not have a car. And where I lived did not have a bus line. So I had to walk 40 blocks to a TCIM call center to get to work every day and back. And in this call center every day, I tried to switch customers to AT&T long distance. And that was how I paid my rent and my electric. My electric was like 60 bucks a month. And I remember that my grocery bill to feed myself, it took $60 every 2 weeks. And I would repeat the same recipes over and over again because at 16, there was no one else to count on but me. And the thing about growing the way that I grew through the cracks in the concrete is that you maladapt. And I did not realize that the ways that I had learned to survive, the things that I did to move through the earth at 16, when I sent myself off to college at 17, I did. I filled out I filled out all the applications and by myself in the living room on this couch I got, this red velvet couch that I got from Goodwill. And if you have not seen, I have a calendar and there is an image that is created, that red velvet couch. Any of my homegirls that came over to my house knew that couch would swallow you whole and the left side had a hole in it. And there's an image of me on that couch, and I was by myself when I got the first acceptance letter. And I decided I was going to pack up everything and leave for Kansas, and I went off to Baldwin University to study mass communication. And when I made that choice, I was a very traumatized child. Yes, a child who could pay rent and electric and balance a budget, but I was a child nonetheless. There was nobody protecting me but me. I could make wild decisions. For example, there was a store called Mervyn's. Now, some of you may not be old enough to know what Mervyn's is. I am. Stay on task. Mervyn's had a shoe sale, and this was one of my formative lessons that I have repeated over and over again. Mervyn's had a shoe sale, and I had just gotten paid. And I am a kid. I am a kid with an apartment. At this point, I have procured a car. I had a little Hyundai. And so I got my little electric blue Hyundai, and I done gone to Eastland Mall in Tulsa, Oklahoma, slid into Mervyn's. And because I had no impulse control and there was nobody to tell me what I could not do, I probably bought 10 pair of shoes in every color that I loved because I could and no one could stop me. And then when the electric was due, I didn't have the money, but I had shoes. And when it was time for me to leave for school, I left in the dark. And I remember this, see, real life experience cured my fuckery. And I cursed like a sailor, get into it. Um, this is who I am. So I learned these habits. I did not have impulse control, and the electric got cut off because I'd spent all my money on shoes. And I'm going to tell y'all, I will never forget the feeling of sitting in my living room in the dark with all my pretty shoes stretched out in front of me. And they were very cute, and it was very dark, and the AC wasn't on. And I said to myself, self, let us never do this again, because that, in fact, was me being complicit in my own pain. I would come up short repeatedly. And I know most 16, 17-year-old kids aren't balancing all these things. And so I give myself grace. But I was complicit for those first few years. I was complicit in my own pain because I was moved by impulse and I would do whatever I wanted and nobody could tell me anything. That was my whole identity. You can't tell me nothing. Who gonna check me? Baby, life will teach you lessons that they can't teach you in class. And so, whether it is a friendship, that brings us back to when I did that, I had a friend who was right there with me, had been my friend since I was 14. And in 2022, during the most difficult season of my life, burying the aunt that operated as my mother and my children's grandmothers, surviving a sexual assault at the hands of someone who had been a platonic friend that I loved and trusted for 15 years, and decided to commit this heinous crime on the day of her private viewing while I was visiting Tulsa. It was a lot to hold. And at the same time that I lost her and that I had to, of course, absolutely end this friendship and seek retribution, one of my dearest friends started coming undone, and they were making choices and harming people. And if I had allowed them to stay in my life, I wanted to keep her because we had been friends for 28 years. And it's very, like, people are so valuable to me. The people that I love are valuable to me. And it is a gift to have friends who have witnessed every iteration of you, who have walked beside you, who know where the bodies are buried, who have the inside jokes and the secrets, who have sat with you through labor and delivery. Like, our love was bone deep, but I was making excuses. I knew I should have ended this friendship well before 2022, but we had this history, and I loved her so deeply, and she kept cutting me. And I'll give you examples. There was one season where she used my photo to catfish strangers on the internet and place me in harm's way. There was another incident where she tried to bring a complete stranger to my home where my children were in the middle of the night, to hook up with them, which was an absolute no. I don't bring people I date anywhere near my children. So for you to meet a stranger on a party line and give them my address was wild. But I always made excuses. I made excuses because that was my best friend. That's what I kept telling myself. That's my best friend. And the offenses just kept getting greater. And because she had access to me and access to everyone that I loved, she started using her access to me to harm people that I loved behind my back. And that was where I had to draw the line. But for years in that situation, I had been causing my own pain, and I had to take responsibility for the fact that because I had her in our inner circle, I had opened the door for her to potentially cause other people pain. And so, what does it look like when you finally decide against it? Finally deciding against it requires you to draw some firm boundaries. And your scenario could be different. For me, I had to let go of our history because that was the real crux of the matter. We were best friends 28 years ago, but we hadn't been best friends for 28 years. We had been slowly growing apart for 28 years, and for 28 years, I had been making excuses for her behavior and the boundary crossing and the lies and the manipulation. I had been making excuses because I did not want to let go of another person because I had lost so many people in this life. And I know that there are doors that I walk through and things that I do right now that I could not be doing if she were still associated with me. And though it was a hard decision, making that choice was one of the best decisions I have ever made. And I talk about this a lot in the Oracle deck and in my work as an end of life doula. Just a moment. Okay, that's better. I talk about these transitions as endings. You can deeply grieve the loss of a friendship. You can deeply grieve the loss of a workplace. I have sat with people through all manner of transition. I have to set this boundary early. I say it all the time. I can only take 5 terminal cases a year as an end of life doula. Walking with someone through actual death is emotional, and it is weighty, and it is heavy, and it requires balance. But the rest of my cases are what I call deaths that come for the spirit and not the body. And in those scenarios, when death comes for the spirit, it is things like divorce, sexual assault, domestic violence, losing a child. I have held end of life ceremonies here in Denver for entire organizations. A lot of nonprofits have had to scale back, close their doors. And in those scenarios, I hold a community wide space for the org, their staff, their alumni, to give them a safe place to grieve. Part of the card, planted, not buried, is giving in to surrendering, should I say, is surrendering to the unbecoming, surrendering to the thing you must let go. My good girlfriend said this many years ago. We were on a trip to this prison in Sterling to teach poetry, and we were talking about life along the way. And she said in the car, she made a declaration that we both repeated, that I release everyone and everything trying to leave my life. In the garden that often looks like a grave, sometimes we hang on so tight. We are still dug in and hanging on to things and people and orgs that we should have walked away from. And in my end of life work, what I notice most is that often it is the unwillingness to surrender that is causing the problems that people deal with. It is the unwillingness to let the thing unravel, unbecome, let it fall into soil and let the thing die. We don't talk about the isolation and the grief enough, but it was really hard. There were days when I would get this amazing news and I would want to call. And I'm dropping into the chat if you need support in an end of life scenario. I am more than happy to help you. Um, I am putting into our chat where you will be able to see it momentarily. Here, I'm going to drop it into the chat for you. And if you have questions, you can visit that at a later time to gain support. But transforming transitions is the name of the end of life org that I founded. So when you get to this space, we're going to call it what ultimately looks like an open grave. The open grave can be a multitude of things, but it is almost always a space that you didn't expect to be in, and a space that you have no control over changing in the immediate. And you have to decide. I love another card that connects with this lesson. It's called necromancy. And when you get down to the brass tacks of things, when you are standing in the open grave of the thing, whether it be the relationship, the friendship, the job, the org that you gave so much to, I want to touch on organizational betrayal. I've talked about what it looks like to have to walk away from friendships. I walked away from one because they sexually assaulted me. I walked away from the other because after 28 years, I realized that one of us was committed to being well. And though one of us knew the lexicon and the language, they were ultimately not willing to pay the cost. And people don't talk about that. There is a cost. I want to show you this particular card. This one is called necromancy. And I'm going to read from necromancy because we are talking about lingering with the dead. Necromancy is on page 78 of the guidebook, by the way, if that is helpful for you. And I can do that. I don't need to make any notes. It is giving me pointers along the way. So necromancy. How many times do you plan on pulling that relationship out of the recycling bin? How many times will you reanimate the corpse? The flesh is foul, and you have emptied the bones of their marrow. There is no sustenance to be had. There is nothing left to consummate or consume. You are dancing with a dead thing. In this season, you may also be called to lay an expired job, relationship, friendship, membership, organization, title, or self to rest. In this stage, you are not garden. You are an open grave that must be climbed out of. You cannot keep cosplaying obsolete identities to consort with the damned. You can't keep carrying the toxic workplace while it burns through black and brown bodies at the speed of light. You cannot offer your broken body as communion wine for nary another soul. Summon the strength to smother the last ragged breath in its shriveled lungs. Love every version of you and listen when you must say goodbye. The quote on this card is pulled from Roll the Stone Away, that companion poetry book, and the poem Dying Again. And it pulls the chaos a corpse can cause, wandering through the world, stench and spoil leaking all over the living. The friend that sexually assaulted me was someone that was one of my best friends that I loved with my whole heart, that I thought would get me through losing my mother not being another thing I had to bury. And what I recognized when I really sat back and looked at all of the signs is that I had been walking around with this dead thing attached to me for quite some time. And in doing so, it had been leaking. That's what corpses do. Dead things have a stench and they spoil and they leak and they eventually get all over the living. And so for me, great, let me minimize that. Um, for me particularly, this card, necromancy and planted not buried go hand in hand, because you got to know what to let go of in that cocoon phase. You've got to determine, while you are in the dark, in the isolation, you've got to decide what is going to become. I call it you transmute a thing. That will take us on to alchemy, which is a card in the deck, and in honor of my good friends over at Alchemy Ritual Goods and my girl Lelania, who helped midwife this project. But you have to take whatever puts you in that grave, and you have to decide, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to alchemize what has happened to you? What are you going to do with the pain, the hurt, the anger? How are you going to use it? Because it could do one of two things. There is a poem that I wrote. I've been writing probably a poem a day. I have not actually intended to write a poem a day, even though it's National Poetry Month. It just worked out that way. And because we have asked this prompt, because I talked to you about what are we holding and how do you make room for lovely things to rush in and fill you full, how do you make sure that you are not complicit in your own grief, in your own pain, when you are in that grave, when you are taking stock in isolation of what has been lost, when you are deciding as you unbecome what no longer serves you, when you decide to stop martyring yourself in the name of community and friends and family, when you decide, because that is how we are often complicit in our own demise. I have buried one friend too many prematurely because everybody needed them and thought that they needed them more than they needed themselves. I've watched my girls work themselves to the bone. I have seen I've seen labor forced and extracted from us in terms of single parenting and motherhood on the front lines of movements, as executive directors at orgs, as program managers, as grant writers. I've seen us as poets and artists and healers and practitioners pour ourselves out like drink offerings for people who wouldn't piss in your mouth if your teeth were on fire. I said what I said. I have seen it time and time again. And those are some of the ways that we are complicit in our own pain. And so, in the unbecoming, in that grave, That is where, in the darkness, in the isolation, that is where you get to decide what serves you, what parts of you are for you, and you get to decide what no longer serves you, what dies, what are you giving back to the soil. If you have a journal, if you journal, I would love for you to consider deciding what you must give to the soil, what is going to fertilize your bloom, because the bloom is what is next. Yes, the seed must be buried and planted, and you are covered up in isolation, and there are all manner of creepy crawly things around you, and you are transforming, and you often don't know what you are transforming into, but you know what you choose not to be anymore. And in that space, I want you to consider, what would it look like to just vote against any portion of self that no longer serves you? What portion of you, what behavior, what pattern, what thought, what can you abandon? What can you feed to the soil so that what must become is nourished? Now we're talking about feeding things to the soil and moving toward ultimately what I would like to call the bloom. So I want to share another quote from the book Salt Eaters by Toni Cade Bambara. And this is what matters, because we're moving toward talking about what is real and what isn't, and who gets to decide. The quote is, "The dream is real, my friends. The failure to make it work is the unreality. What dream have you been treating as the unreality, and what has that cost you?" What is the cost? If you really, I've asked this question. If you really want to be well, I love at the beginning of Salt Eaters when she asked the question, "Are you sure, sweetheart, that you want to be well?" Because so often, the people that we love, the people that we care about, they don't want to pay the cost. There is a cost. There is a cost. There is always a cost. The woman that I have become cost me everything, and she is worth it. The woman that I am becoming will cost portions of the woman that I am, and she is worth it. Your wellness, your wholeness, it will ask you to change in ways that you may not be ready for. And so you really have to ask yourself, are you willing to commit to what it takes to be whole? In these toxic friendships, relationships, and codependent situations where you have lacked boundaries, there are often friendships, opportunities, organizations, titles. Baby, when I tell you I am known, I'll throw a title out the door for my freedom in a New York minute. None of those things matter to me. But what are you holding on to? What are you holding on to that is preventing you from being well? And why are you holding it? Do you need support to let it go? Are you struggling with something that you don't feel like you have the tools to tackle? And if given the tools, are you willing to fight for it? Because as soon as you say you want to be well, baby, the universe gonna test. The universe coming through, God and the ancestors are going to come and test if you really gonna fight for it. You are going to have to push through in the same way. I lived in one of the most toxic, unhealthy, almost didn't make it out scenarios for a year and 9 months while I made these cards, while I wrote plays, while I wrote books, while I made medicine, while I raised kids, and the whole time still had to drag myself to therapy. I have complex PTSD, and I had to drag myself to therapy. I had to be willing to sit in the pain. I had to commit to showing up for my AccuDetox and my self-care. And sorry, my voice is not as strong as it was. I won't hold you much longer. We have a couple of more prompts and questions, and then I will check to see if anybody has placed any questions in the chat. But today's message and session is really all around what cost? What cost are you willing to pay for your wellness, for your wholeness? I will give up everyone and everything just like that if I have to, in the name of wholeness. And we talk about individualism in the US a lot, but I have to make it plain that I believe in collective healing, but there are portions of your healing journey that are solitary and require you to go sit down somewhere and get whole. And in that process, you can return to community for support again and again. Community can walk you through lots of individual processes. I have healed repeatedly in ceremony, in community, using indigenous practices, Western medicine as well. I will use whatever it takes to be whole and be free. And I hope that you choose to do the same. As you are working with your decks, for those of you that already have yours, I love seeing you tag me on Facebook and Instagram. What I know to be certain, and shout out to my Pink Robe Chronicles family, y'all were with me every step of the way. 3 years ago, this Oracle deck started out as one little line item in my journal. And I didn't think I was an artist, but I had this collection of images of striking photos, and I knew that I could change them. But it took a process of creating a cohesive brand identity and writing every single word, writing and rewriting until I felt like it was timeless and divine and exactly the medicine that I wanted to put into the hands of community. Took me 3 long years. And those that know me well know I almost didn't live to see it happen. But I refuse to give up. I refuse to bow. I have gone toe to toe with death multiple times in the form of men with hungry mouths, in the form of interlocking systems, in the form of labor and delivery and malpractice. It took 9 bags of blood to save me. I am forever grateful for the 5 women who spent 3 days inside that hospital while I fought for my life. But I almost didn't make it, and I kept creating. I will write with my very last breath. I will create, I will dream big. And this, at the time that I started it, was my biggest dream ever. What is wild is that I'm halfway through a second deck now, and that I've built things now that are much larger than this. But when I started, this was a lofty goal. This seemed out of my reach. This seemed impossible. And it is finished. I did it. I had to decide whether or not y'all were going to mourn me and I was going to be buried or planted. And I wrote and read and spoke it every day until it became life. Your words are powerful. I spoke this deck into existence. I spoke the breath in my body into existence. And so when we talk about the prompt that I touched on, the dream is real. What dream you got on hold? What has life and hardship and challenges made you put down, walk away from, put on the back burner? What are you actually supposed to be doing? Because most of the time, you know, somewhere in your knower, somewhere deep in the marrow of your bone, you know what you need to do. And sometimes it seems lofty and impossible, and you might not have all of the tools. But if you just make up your mind, I made up my mind that I was planted, not buried, and that the dream was real, and it is. And so are you. And so I want you to journal this week about what dream you have been treating as unreality. And what would it cost you? What would it cost you to pursue it with every fiber of your being? Baby, I move. Sometimes people are often like, girl, slow down, but you don't understand. I am pursuing peace and wholeness and purpose with every fiber of my being. And it's funny, even though 2026 is catastrophically wild, I have still managed to pursue joy and purpose, and I've still managed to accomplish things. I am calling this my year of yes. Anything that I have ever wanted to do, trust and believe, I am already attempting to do it as we speak, or it is in the works. Take every risk, step out on faith, write the thing, produce the play, write the script, find an agent. There is a way. Whatever it is that you were meant to do, even with the world on fire, we need your medicine. There is a way. I want you to think about that cost. And finally, the last prompt before I get ready to wrap us up. What is happening to the daughters of the yam? Seem like they just don't know how to draw up powers from the deep like before. And the question, when did you last feel fully connected to your power? And what pulled you away from it? That is the question that I want you to sit with, because usually the dream that you're not pursuing, the thing that seems too lofty, too impossible, that you don't have a blueprint for, that you don't know how to move forward with, usually that's exactly what you're supposed to be doing, and help will come. Everything that I'm telling you, I had a vision board and I had a vision board, an iPad, this software that Lelania taught me how to use that let you collage and edit images, and hope. And I've always been a writer, so writing wasn't the hardest part, but ensuring that you say what is an accurate and a timely word that spans ages and communities and circumstance is not something that you can do in an instant and overnight. I want you to consider when you last felt fully connected to your power and what pulled you away from it. This past weekend, I participated in Pillow Forts, an immersive experience over at the Red Line Gallery with so many of my artists and beloveds. Oh my God, everybody I love, most of everybody I love in this city was in the building. And then my good girlfriend, Deborah Perry, flew in from Tulsa, and she was here from Wednesday to Sunday. And so she was at Pillow Forts with us. And I bring this up because the space that I held at Pillow Forts was I held the altar room, and I brought 3 large crystal bowls full of water, and we had paper. I use this a lot in my transforming transitions work. I brought paper that is water soluble, and I walked people through a ritual where you release what no longer serves you. And I am going to put that ritual or a portion of it into the chat because I want you to be able to walk away with some medicine and with something that you can use again and again once you decide what no longer serves you. But it is two-part because that I feel very connected to source and spirit almost all the time. But my good friend Teray said it and Deb said it, and I heard it from a few other people. And it's not something I would normally say, but they were like, girl, you were in your bag because all of me was in the room. I allowed people to write what they wanted to let go of onto this water soluble paper. And then in groups, I would do this invocation, which I am also going to read. And when I finish the invocation, that is our closing benediction. But what I did is I allowed them to cry, weep, do whatever they needed to do. I had a misting bottle of Florida water that I used to clear and cleanse the cards. And so everyone got to write down what they wanted to let go of. And in community, they got to put it into the crystal bowls and let it dissolve and watch it unbecome. And then they got to choose a card from my deck and read the card that spoke to them. And then they were held and smudged and cleansed. And then they all got to, I did this process with at least 20 people. And I was in an altar, what we call the altar room by myself, facilitating this for everyone for about 3.5 hours. And when the entire experience had wrapped and they had taken the love letters that were written to the future, set them on fire outside in a fire pit, 3 friends, Tolu, one of the poets, Bianca, and another friend who escapes me in this moment, took the crystal bowls that were full of the things that we released and that I said benediction over, and they poured it over the fire that had all of the love letters to the future and let that be what sealed our prayers and our hopes and dreams. And so I am going to read this transition to you, and you will be able to come back to this and listen to it as often as you like. And I'm also going to drop it down here in our chat so that you can come back to it again when you need to. Okay, 1 second. Let me drop this into the chat so that everyone has it. There we go. Okay. Thank you all for being with me. It took a lot. You will find out in the coming weeks. I cannot tell you how much it took in order for us to survive, to get here, to live through this. And actually, I'm going to turn it into a note so that you all can see it without it being so chopped up. Bear with me. And that should do the trick. Okay. Here we are. As you sit with the last question that I asked you, I felt the most powerful. I felt fully connected to my power and in my bag, as Teray said, my good friend. Such a gift. Teray, I so appreciate you. I appreciate you, Susie and Deb, and the truest tribe that walks with me. But I felt deeply connected to Source, being able to hold space. I am always 1 foot between both worlds. I'm always walking among the living and the dead. And so for me to hold a lantern and guide people across those transitions resonates. It is a thing that I am made to do. And so I felt fully in my power because in that room was my poetry. In that room was the art that I created. And in that room was the end of life doula. And I did not have to compartmentalize myself. I did not have to dim my shine. I did not have to be less. I could show up fully and let the ancestors move and watch people break free and heal. And so, whatever it is, whatever the thing is, I want you to think about, when did you last feel fully connected to your power? And what, if anything, did you allow to pull you away from it? And as you do that, as you consider what it means to be planted and not buried, I want you to name the version of yourself you have outgrown as you are writing. Do not edit. Don't try to make it pretty. Tell the truth. Name the weight. Name the lie. Let your hand move like it is being chased by freedom. The paper can hold it. The water can take it. You do not have to carry it anymore. Watch it loosen its grip. Let the water do what it has always done. Transform, carry, cleanse. You do not have to retrieve it. You do not have to remember it the same way again. What has been released is no longer yours to tend. What has dissolved returns to the great cycle, unnamed, unbound, undone. May your hands feel lighter. May your breath come easier. May your spirit remember its own vastness. Walk from this altar, from this resurrection session, not empty, but unburdened, not erased, but rewritten. And so it is, and so you are. Thank you for doing this, for this work. There is a cost, and we will pay it gladly. So if the question is, do you want to be well? Then my answer is resoundingly, now and always, yes. Thank you for joining me. Go thy way and be made whole, friends. We did that. Good night.